Welcome to From Doubt to Drive, Entrepreneurs Only. Join us on an inspired journey through the ups and downs of successful entrepreneurs. Our hosts, Mario C. Bauer and Florian Schneider, will explore how conquering doubt is essential for entrepreneurs to truly unleash drive. By being a part of our community, you too can learn how to propel from doubt to drive. So tune in, buckle up, and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to our show From Doubt to Drive. Today we'll talk about burgers again. Mario, last time you asked me what my favorite burger is. You are a son of a butcher, so tell me, when was your first burger?
Oh, my first burger,
that?
actually, yes, my first burger, my dad is a butcher, and burgers are not popular in Austria, but I remember that a friend of him said, like, you need to try a burger. So he made us a burger. I'm not sure if it can compete with anything what we know now as a premium burger, but it was so powerful to us because it was the first time we had it. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I had that, but I can tell you definitely, I miss a good burger. I'm stranded here in Sri Lanka. There's a lot of great food, but there is
no barriers
definitely
at all.
a room to grow a great burger.
No, but we have a person here who knows a lot about burgers. It's Tom Barton. Tom, welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You founded with your partner Honest Burger in 2011 in Brixton. Today, you're counting 40 stores, 900 people staff, I think around 55 million pounds in sales. So a very successful story you actually have. When I remember right, you came from school and then you started that business. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, me and Phil, my fellow co-founder, I was actually studying at Brighton University. I was doing a business degree, and I was kind of hobbling through my degree, and was in that kind of crossroads of life when you're that age. I was 23. Just got a pretty average degree from Brighton. Really didn't enjoy it. Didn't know what I was going to do. And just started working in restaurants as a bit of a kind of stopgap, which sadly is what a lot of restaurant jobs seem to be in this country. They feel like they're a pause until you get your kind of proper career, which is what I did, to be fair. But then me and Phil, we worked in this amazing restaurant down in Brighton called Riddle and Finn's, which is still there. It's absolutely mega. And we just got on really well. We love the restaurant. A good restaurant is like a family. I know it sounds really cheesy, but it really is. You work together, you party together, you socialize together, you help each other out. You're just in that unit, and that's exactly what that restaurant was for us. I met my wife there as well, so it was such a great time. And we were living in Brighton, by the beach, sun shining. First time we actually had like the tiniest semblance of money, because we were broke students before that. And yeah, Phil was just like, he was in the same kind of crossroads as me, a couple of years ahead, not sure what to do. He was sat on a chairlift in France, in Chamonix, I think. He couldn't get me out of his head, and he wanted to do something with me, basically, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So we thought, what's there to lose? Let's give it a go. But I will caveat, we never once thought about opening a restaurant.
No.
That was many years later. The conversation that we had and what we wanted to do was, we want to go into, I want to say street food, but street food wasn't really a term used back then. that would have been 13, 14 years ago. Street food wasn't a big scene. It was, there were people cooking food on the street, but the kind of street food revolution in the UK, where it's actually, you can get some amazing food in that form. Back then it was a little bit rough around the edges, and it was kind of roadside burgers and fish and chips and stuff like that. So that was what we wanted to do. Our goal was we wanted to cook burgers at Glastonbury.
So you came from school, no business experience, and then you obviously reacted as a real founder. You started something completely new for you and your partner. How did that feel? Any doubts in that time? Uncharted territory? What to do?
No, and I think the wonderful phrase, which is so relevant, and it's such a difficult one to get your head around when you're young, because you just can't. But the arrogance of youth, and you just no one. Well, I certainly wasn't capable. But when I was that age, I just jumped headfirst into it. We never for a second thought we'd fail. We just thought we were so confident in our food.
Yeah.
We were just like, we'll do it, man. We've got you just don't have the pressures of later life on you, kids, mortgage, employees, fucking, tax accounts and filings to make. We just felt like we were at a time in our life where we could try anything, and if it goes wrong, doesn't really matter. Like we'll pick ourselves up again and we'll crack on. So no, I honestly, we've had this conversation a lot, Phil and I don't ever recall looking back and being nervous or worried. We were so excited by it, and we believed in it so much. And the idea of working for yourself, and we'd only ever worked for other people, we were just totally consumed by excitement, and probably a little bit of arrogance, a bit of ego, which you need. Just don't let it get the majority of you.
But Tom, now let's say a decade later and 40 restaurants later and a girlfriend who became a wife and a couple of hundred employees further and the kid in the family, the baggage, so to say, grow and the easiness of use or the arrogance of use where we cannot lose anything, suddenly we can lose something because your name is out there, you build the brand. So although you didn't have this, we call that Schwellenangst, which is the fear of threshold and borders, when you have these big obstacles in front of you and you say like, should I jump or should I not jump? And this fear of unknown, because it's so comfortable in our comfort zone, so it's difficult to get out there. And it seems in the early days you didn't have that, but I'm sure later on with more responsibility it came. So can you share with us a situation in your life as an entrepreneur, as a founder, where you hit a really big roadblock or where you had a big struggle? If you look back now in your career with Honest Burger, what is the first kind of struggle, roadblock which comes to your mind?
I think a big one from the very early days was a lot of founders tend to be control freaks. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with, your business better than anyone, that kind of mentality. So I think letting go became quite difficult. And when you're setting up a restaurant, like we opened our first restaurant in Brixton, and it's, tiny little shoebox restaurant where I would cook the burgers and Phil would serve the burgers, and there was, a couple other people that would be helping us out. It became quite tough to learn the skills required to hand that over to someone else. And I was interviewing, I remember, I would have been 25 or something like that then. And I remember interviewing chefs that were like twice my age, who'd worked in kitchens when they started their career in kitchens, and I would have been like 5 years old. And I was just like, I just didn't really know how to combat that. I think maybe that was a bit where I felt a little bit out of my comfort zone, and a little bit like I remember there were lots of times in the early days of Honest where I was just craving for a boss, craving for someone to tell me what to do, because I just didn't know the answer. And you try, and what I've learned since then is actually that this is an old one but a good one, but mistakes, they shape you in life, not just in your career and business. Everyone makes mistakes in their life, and that could be through relationships or friendships or careers, whatever it might be. But they're there to learn, for you to learn from. I always say, honest, it's only a mistake if you make it twice. First time is, as long as you learn from that, and God, we made some howlers in our time. But I think just a lot of it was growing up. We were still young. We were out drinking too much, not sleeping, partying with our teams in the restaurants. And I was anyway. Phil was a bit better behaved than I was, but yeah, we were doing exactly the fun stuff. But it's easy to let that kind of go to your head. And we were opening restaurants, and we had queues out the door, and we were very cash rich business, and we hit the kind of burger market at exactly the right time, and Brixton just catapulted us into the food scene. And to be honest with you, I wasn't ready for that. Like, mentally, I wasn't ready for that. And it's taken me a long time to grow up and actually realize that if you run a business, you've got to do it seriously. If you don't, you might be lucky and you might get through, but chances are, if you don't take it seriously and if you're not mature, it will end badly. And so, Tom, I had to make some pretty big life decisions.
You said a strong sentence at the beginning. You said, like, I was craving for a boss. So when you now translate that in kind of how you operate in a crisis or roadblock, if you hit the roadblock, if you hit the crisis, what's your modus operandi to make a decision? Do you consult with your friends at home, with your family? You meditate, you isolate, you read, you calculate, you talk to your partner? What's your way normally to make up the next step? Because we all face that troubles, but we have different ways how to get you out of there. So what you said, you're craving for a boss. We all know, as an entrepreneur, we don't have a boss, so the boss is not here. What did you use, or what do you use now as a tool set or a sounding board or whatever to get out of difficult situations?
I mean, mentally, for me, it's exercise. Exercise that's my kind of, I was going to say that's my meditation, but I've done a fair bit of meditation in my time, and I've really enjoyed it. It's just something I've never fully committed to, and I don't really know why. But I find exercise. We all know what's good for us, don't we? Everybody, even the most unhealthy person in the world, they know what is healthy. It's just forcing yourself to do that. I remember hearing someone say that discipline is such a kindness to yourself if you're disciplined. Now, obviously, you can take that to extreme, but I know when I'm disciplined, and I have massive peaks and troughs, and we've just moved into a new house, and it's just a mess. And I like organization. I like knowing where things are and how things are going. And to bring this back to work, like when I find a problem, if we've hit a really big problem and it's something that I could have avoided because I haven't planned it well enough, then that's really frustrating. But then I need to learn from that, and then I need to go into the next project more organized, more focused, more disciplined, more dedicated, because it's not rocket science. I know that's, I'm not trying to oversimplify everything, but communication and being disciplined with yourself and treating your body with respect, and sleeping right and eating well. And I love like sauna and ice baths and things like that that just give you a really nice boost, and I just feel like you're really looking after yourself. Like stuff like that makes me feel good, and it makes me feel like I'm headed in the right kind of trajectory, which I need, because without that, this Honest is a beast now, and there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I do feel that pressure. But I'm also feel very proud and very privileged that we've grown this business to where it is today.
Tom, do you recall the most difficult moment in your career as an entrepreneur?
Yes, I know exactly when that was. That was COVID was without question the most difficult part of my career. I remember always say, I remember the good old days when we only had to worry about Brexit. And I think, we thought Brexit was going to destroy our industry, and, how on earth are we going to recruit, and where are people, how are we going to staff our restaurants? And then COVID came along and you're like, whoa, okay. Brexit kind of came and went.
Brexit was easy.
COVID.
Yeah.
COVID was just something else. I've never felt so kind of helpless in my life. There were moments, like really dark moments, where I just thought, this is it. Like, there's no way we're going to get out of this. I remember when the first announcement was happening, and Boris sort of, shut all of hospitality.
Yeah.
And everyone was kind of waiting to see what other people were doing. What were the big guys doing? What were your peers doing? There was a bit of a game of kind of chicken. And, there were people making, mass redundancies on Zoom, and we just didn't know what to do. And we thought the best way is just to let's be honest, food's in the title. So we said we got all of our people on a call and said, look, we had about 6 weeks worth of wages in the bank. We just said, once that's up, all bets are off, really. That's yeah. And that actually went down very, very well with our people, because they appreciated the honesty we had. And then, thank God, furlough was announced, which I'd never even heard that word in my entire life before. So furlough was announced, and I literally saw it. I heard it on the news. I started crying when it came on. I'm getting goosebumps even think about it, because that was kind of our lifeline, and we thought, right, we can keep going. And then we just, we embraced delivery. We were down to our prep kitchen, because we had about 6 tons of beef down there that we turned into lasagnas and cottage pies, and we started at lasagna, which is actually quite a lengthy thing to make when you're doing like 5,000 of them, and we ended up with just tubs of bolognese. That was much easier, but we that was without question the hardest moment, because you just didn't know. And I thought, is this how honest is just going to crash and burn now, like so many hospitality businesses did, sadly, in that time. But we didn't. We survived, and we're lived to tell the tale.
Excellent. And you just shared how you did it from a business perspective, but you as a founder are also impacted or affected by that personally. What did you do for your soul in that moment? How could you actually balance that pressure as an individual?
Yeah, it was really hard. My wife was incredibly kind and helpful to me, and just put her arm around me when she could see I was really struggling at that time. But yeah, I mean, I remember it was really bizarre. And anyone who was in London at that time, in March, we had this March and April, this crazy spell of the most beautiful weather. And it was just blue skies. There were no planes. There was no noise. There's hardly any traffic. And I used to get on my bike every now and again, and just, I don't know if this was legal, probably was illegal at the time, but we'd just go for a ride around London. And it was so strange, like, riding through Oxford Circus. I remember, cycling through. So every now and again, we'd cycle around just to check on the restaurants and check they hadn't been broken into, or I found that very kind of comforting, actually, just cycling around, just seeing that the whole city is under the same kind of pressures. But yeah, I remember cycling through Oxford Circus, and there was a homeless guy with a duvet wrapped around his, like, he didn't even look to cross the road because there was just no cars, and he was just walking across the main junction in Oxford Circus, and there was just no one else there. It felt like, kind of zombie apocalypse or something like that. Yeah, it was really bizarre. But no, cycling and fresh air, exercise is me. I actually discovered HIIT classes in COVID. And that was the thing. I was doing like 2 HIIT classes a day. I don't think I've ever been in such good shape, to be honest with you, because I've just had so much time.
So your go-to seems to be like getting your head space free with exercise and really being out there. But we mentioned at the beginning that you set up the business with a partner. So in a crisis, especially like in an existential crisis, like we all had with COVID, and you very honestly shared here, how important was it for you to have this partner, not being a sole founder or a CEO there? How important was this partnership back then?
Oh, completely. And I should mention Dorian, who's our third co-founder, who came on when we opened Brixton, to when we turned into we went from kind of outside catering to restaurants. That was Dorian was a big part of that. And yeah, I mean, I think the Honest wouldn't have survived with just one of us. We Honest wouldn't have started, and it certainly wouldn't have survived. And forget about the real struggles of COVID, which was really helpful that we were bouncing up kind of pressures off each other. And by COVID, we had a full exec team, so you knew that there were people who were running their departments and keeping their departments, alive and kicking. And I was doing my bit, to go back to the exercise thing, I was doing virtual HIIT classes for our people. So every Wednesday, anyone could join in. We used to get 100 or so people join these calls, and I dress in some tragic 80s kind of aerobic attire, and we just do some exercise.
We need to see a picture of that.
I'll send you one.
We need to see a picture of that.
Bust out some 80s cheesy music and we just jump around, and there's little things like that. But me and Phil, we're kind of like we're kind of like brothers now. We've been through so much together, so we talk a lot, and just bouncing the pressures. But yeah, I mean, I always say if I meet young founders today, I always urge them to find a partner. Find someone you love and you trust, and not necessarily your best friend, because I think founder relationships, for me, they're more like sibling relationships where they kind of transcend friendship a little bit. And I think friendship can be very difficult because then you've got, then you're all in the same friend network and it all gets quite complicated. But I think founders together are very, very powerful, and I just wouldn't be able to. I don't think I'd be able to cope with the stress of doing something like this on my own. I know I wouldn't.
You said, Tom. Oh, sorry, Mario. Go ahead.
No, I just had a thought, because naturally throughout this conversation, you said a lot honest and honestly. So I was thinking, with such a strong value-driven brand, I mean, the word is above your door, Honest Burger. I tried to, because we talked a lot about COVID now, but I tried to find a moment where your values were under attack and you should have made maybe a compromise, and you didn't, because you followed through on the strong values of Honest Burger. Do you recall a difficult decision where you had to put values first, although maybe there was a short-term gain on financials or whatever? Is there anything you recall where you said, okay, we had to play the value card strong and we had to stick with the term honest? Because it struck me that you mentioned the term so often here during this conversation. Yeah. Was there any situation where you recall?
I can think of a very good situation, actually. There was a pretty dark time in Honest's history. Was around paid breaks. I don't know if you saw that, but it was a bit of a bit of a scandal, I suppose. But we might be good to try and set the record straight, to be honest with you. But yeah, we during COVID, we created something called paid breaks, which very unusual in most industries. In hospitality, it's very, very unusual, where you work a double, we pay you for your break. And we did that as a kind of perk during COVID, just because everyone was scrambling around and scrapping for people and trying to recruit anyone and anybody that would come and join your teams. So we did that as this kind of stopgap measure. And we probably didn't think it through well enough, in the sense that when you put something out there, it's very hard to retract. But then, like every business in hospitality right now, you've got soaring costs. I said, I hark back to the good old days of COVID. Then you've got Brexit. Then you had the war in Ukraine. Now you've got further wars that are just, damaging world supply chains, and the impact on inflation has hit pretty much every input into most businesses, and hospitality has been massively affected by that. So we had to make a decision that we couldn't justify paid breaks anymore. It was impossible for us to do it. So we wanted to replace paid breaks with reinvest some of that money into our wages. And that's what we decided to do. And it was a really difficult time for us because a journalist got hold of the piece of internal communications that we sent out, and it was one of those decisions where we were like, look guys, we don't want to be having to do this, but it's very, very difficult to justify something like this that was very much a kind of short-term stopgap during COVID, and now we're out of COVID, we need to take it away. And that was tough. I found that very, very difficult because you could see it was hurting our people, even though the vast majority of cases actually were better off without paid breaks because of the impact we'd had on their salaries. But it was just one of those scandals where I didn't feel like it was fair at all, because it was on Twitter. It was people who weren't even reading the detail. They were just reading comments, seeing a comment, writing their own comment underneath. Lots of kind of hate, escalating, and mud throwing. Yeah, and it's not nice. We've had that. We had that once before, actually. There's a market in Altrincham up in Manchester, and there's a pizza concept up there called Honest Crust Pizza. And we decided quite early on, I think we're probably 2 or 3 years in, that we wanted the IP on the word honest in hospitality and honest burgers in hospitality, because we felt that name is super powerful. And we worked our ass off to make it work. So we paid a lot of money, and we protected ourselves, which is what professional, well-run businesses do. And then a business up in Manchester, Honest Crust Pizza, I think is still going. I think I've heard they're really great pizzas. I think we were quite heavy-handed, because I think we let our lawyers do the talking, and we should have probably just picked up the phone to the guy and had a chat, and I'm sure we'd have found a much more simple resolution. But our lawyers sent a strongly worded letter, as lawyers love to do, and just all hell broke loose. And it was, big business from London attacking small independent business in Manchester, and it was this really big kind of north-south divide. And it was horrible. That was the first time that I'd ever, something had gone viral and it wasn't positive, for honest. And I remember just feeling a bit like, this isn't fair. Like we've just tried to do what a professional business does. Like that's it. It's the law of IP. We're just trying to protect what's ours. And it totally backfired and was a rough time. But it does, the lesson learned there is, don't let lawyers do the talking, when you could just have a friendly conversation.
We take that definitely in our learning sheet. Don't let lawyers do the talking.
Yeah.
You let lawyers come in when you can't resolve it yourself. And maybe that's a bit harsh on lawyers. Our lawyer, Julian, is lovely, by the way. He wasn't the guy who did this. So yeah, Julian, if you're listening, we love you. But it was just one of those situations you're like, how did we let it get to this? Like, it could have been this isn't honest. This isn't the kind of business we are. And sure enough, Phil actually went up there and met the guy and had a pizza and a beer with him, and was like,
so much easier than to do it face to face. Florian, I interrupted you before you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Tom, because you said in the beginning, letting go became quite difficult. Now you hired a CEO, so your function actually changed from having the helm into a shareholder or board member or whatever, a new configuration in your business life occurred when you hired a CEO. Can you tell us a little bit about your feelings back then? How did that feel to let actually go?
Well, it's kind of because if we go right back to the beginning, it was me, Dor, and Phil. And Phil was ops, I was food, and Dor was our MD. So Dor was looking at expansion and property, kind of property strategy. We actually brought on a FD, guy called Gary, who then became our MD. But Gary, me, and Phil were very, very close, and we kind of got on really well. And I was left to do food still, and that food is the thing that I enjoy the most. I don't want to be the CEO of Honest Burgers. That's not my skill. That's not what I'm good at, and it's not what I'd enjoy either. Like, I love food. I love projects. I love creating things. I love like having a clear boundaries. And CEOs you've got to, you're managing people, and you're managing strategy, and you're managing across multiple areas, multiple disciplines, multiple departments, and that's not me. So actually, that element was fairly comfortable for me. And Thomas Kelly, our new CEO, has been great to see someone of his experience and caliber really get stuck in, and the confidence he has on our brand. It's confidence breeds confidence, doesn't it? It's a really great thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the point I was making on letting go was much more granular. It was like, I cook the burgers. I've now got to walk away from our restaurant in Brixton with that guy cooking the burgers, and I've got to make sure he does them as well as me. And we'd always say back in Brixton, you're only as good as your last burger, and I still say that now. And that was hard. I'm going on my first holiday. I think I say it was hard, but we'd worked ourselves literally to illness. All three of us. Like, Dorian went down with like a savage case of flu. Then Phil, there's a photo in Time Out of Phil, and he literally looks like a corpse. He's like stood in the kitchen, and he's got this massive sty on his eye. He's like really pale. And he's trying to kind of serve this burger, and Time Out decided to use that for like our big sort of front cover of Honest for a while. But he was mega ill. He'd lost the feeling in both his arms because I think it was from just pressing burgers on the grills too much. And then I got shingles as well, which you get when you're like 70 years old. I got it when I was like 26 or something. And it was just rough. So actually, when we kind of had to hand over to people, because we were doing like 100-hour plus weeks, and then we started opening more restaurants, and it just something had to give.
Would that be also an advice from your side to young entrepreneurs or other entrepreneurs, that they have to also take care about themselves physically, mentally?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I mean, I didn't back then. Kitchens and hospitality's come a hell of a long way since you think of like the 80s, when it was kind of rock and roll, and it was drugs and booze and screaming and high testosterone, and it was kind of quite yeah, exactly, and fire, and lots of theatre, and I guess what Gordon Ramsay's created his career around. But I don't think we were never like that. But we certainly didn't look after ourselves. But then we were young, you could bounce back. We could work a 15, 16-hour shift, go out on the piss for 8 hours and get up 2 hours later, and you do it all again. It just felt like, the kind of, you were riding this wave of excitement. And I think if I did a week like that now, I'd be dead in about 3 days. So I couldn't do that now. But no, I mean, I'd always recommend to anyone, doesn't matter how old you are, if you look after yourself, you'll do a better job. Like, very simple. Your body, if you're well slept, you're well fed, you're well exercised, you will be better at anything.
Tom, when you shared a lot of very transparent and very honest, like your company's name, about crisis at the beginning and at COVID, and we talked a lot about the past. If we now, towards the end of the podcast, travel to the here and now, and you would say, like, what keeps you up at night right now in terms of business, in terms of the overall situation in the world? What keeps you up at night right now?
I think probably the same thing as a lot of people. It's just the world feels like a very unstable place. And there's, we're all, most people listening to this podcast are very fortunate in the life that they're able to lead, and not living in a kind of active war zone as a lot of people are these days. I feel like stability is what I would crave for. And like I said, like the UK is still an incredibly prosperous and lucky place to live, but it still feels quite precarious at times. And I was saying to you, Mario, before the podcast about COVID, and the hangover of COVID was really substantial for us as a business. And COVID, the peak of COVID was rough, but everyone was in it together because we were all kind of dealing with the same challenges. The aftermath and the hangover, we call it, was the thing that we struggled with the most, because COVID had kind of stopped and everyone was back to normal, but they weren't, because lots of people, spending habits, working habits, all those things were so different. And like I said, it's only been the last 6-7 months, I'd say, where we're starting to see customers go back to how they used to operate. And we're very exposed in the city and in central London and tourism and all these things. And you realize actually the whole world and the whole economy is just so fragile, and certain things change. I remember, when I used to kind of catastrophize about Honest, I was thinking, what could be the worst thing that could happen to Honest? And for me, it was always something like BSE or something that would have just taken the beef industry down, and just so no one would eat beef anymore. And then veganism was a really big thing, and I was thinking, guys, is our plant-based meats the future? And I firmly believe they're not, by the way, but that's a whole nother podcast. But it was just, you just don't know what's on the corner, do you? Like for a pandemic to be the thing that grinded everything to a halt, I'd never in my wildest dreams thought of that and strategized that and catastrophized that. I don't know if anyone else did, really. Maybe I'm sure we're all more conscious of the impact of pandemics now. But yeah, I guess I feel like the world is more fragile, and I know our business is more fragile than I thought it would be, because I didn't think there were so many things out there that could just grind it to a halt. But there are very real things that do that. So you just got to get the business in the strongest possible state it can be. And for us, we're ready to start growing now. That's the big one. We want to get the business back into growth. Growth is opportunities. It's great, for morale. It's great for the bottom line. So I'm nervous, obviously, because growing any business is tricky, and the landscape for growth is totally different to the one we're used to pre-COVID. But I'm confident. We've still got a banging product that is only going to get better as we invest more and more into it. So I'm still confident.
Definitely. And I want to take this opportunity to really, this is one of the brands who live by daily execution what is above the door. There's a lot of great burgers out there, and you know that, and there's a lot of your peers or competition, but I always had the feeling like whatever you guys do and touch, there is a strong value set behind. And I want to
thank you
to close that podcast with a more personal question, because you talked a lot about this young partying arrogance of the youth version of yourself, the younger Tom, and now you are the family man, you have a kid, you've grown the business, you handed it over to a CEO. How would this young version of yourself, Tom, look at the current 3.0, 4.0 version look now? What would he think about you?
That's a very good question. I think deep down he'd be proud of me. I think I've done a lot of soul searching, and a big one for me actually was I don't drink alcohol anymore. I haven't drunk alcohol for over 5 years now, and some people alcohol is very good, and you can have a glass of wine and enjoy yourself. Some people you can't, and alcohol can be quite a burden on your kind of on your lifestyle. So yeah, I think my younger self would be proud of my older self. He'd probably ask, why have you got so many grey hairs as well? But he'd probably be happy that I've still got hair. So that's the other thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Rather gray hairs than no hair. Thank you so much, Tom, for being that honest and transparent. I think it was a huge help for entrepreneurs and young leaders listening to this podcast, because the whole purpose of that series is to share that all of us have struggles and all of us face roadblock, and it's just like how to get over it. And we learn so much by listening to entrepreneurs like you and others and finding out red lines in between them. And there's already a lot of learnings out there, and you added some. So thank you for doing that. And greetings to your newborn, to your family, and keep on rocking the burger world.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Florian.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, Mario, you as a butcher's son, what are the learnings?
Butcher's son with, yes, Tom is a true friend, and honest is not just the motto of the brand, it's also his motto, and you feel like he wants to share, and he wants to pass on knowledge. Obviously, as a restaurant professional, and we all love that industry, is that a good restaurant is like a family. He met his wife there. Very strong, co-founder driven burger joint, incredible build on that value. Good restaurant is like a family. I like that.
Yeah, excellent. What I actually took as a learning is that mistakes shape your life.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And it's only a mistake if you do it twice. So everybody can struggle at the first time.
Yes, and he talked a lot about the struggles, and if we go at the same stuff what he shared in the beginning, said he was craving for a boss. I like that to be honest, to say he missed this guiding principles, and he said he could have never done it alone, and he gave the recommendation to look out for a strong co-founder. But what was interesting is he said, don't take your best friend. The founder relationship is more like a sibling relationship. And Florian, what we always said when we looked for partners out there, we always said you need to take somebody who you would go on holiday with. You need a certain common sense of value. You don't need to be the best buddy, but it needs to be somebody you feel comfortable around. I think that was a good learning from him. Founders like a sibling, not like a friend.
Another good learning in my mind is don't let lawyers do the talking. You have to do it yourself.
With a disclaimer to his own
to
lawyer,
his own
and
one,
to all of the good friends out there. But I think what he meant is like, don't let somebody else handle if it's escalate. Take back control.
You have to
because
do it
they could have found a solution with these other entrepreneurs, but they didn't. I also like the way, and we saw that in a lot of other podcasts too. Exercise. Find time for yourself. Sorry. Exercise. Find time for yourself and clear your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Last one I've got, and maybe also the last one for you, is you're only as good as your last burger.
Yeah, that's a t-shirt line. I always said to my team, like, come up with the learnings which can fit on a t-shirt, but you are only as good as your last burger is definitely, dear Tom, the main learning, the headline of this podcast, and also the closing remarks. So that was really good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Florian.
Thank you, Mario.
That was great. See you soon. Tune in and cook your burger as good as the last one.
Until next week. Bye-bye.
Until next week.
Wow, We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we did. But sharing is not just caring, it is also empowering. So recommend this podcast to fellow entrepreneurs who might need a dose of inspiration. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on future episodes. Thank you for being part of the community from Doubt to Drive Entrepreneurs Only. Mario and Florian are already gearing up for the next episode. Until then, stay tuned, stay driven, and we'll be back next week.